Hello, everybody. Welcome. Give it a few seconds to pop up over on YouTube, but I'm very happy. Those of you who've been following my channel know that I've been talking quite a bit about the Harper Collins Union having been on strike, and I believe we're on day 29.
Yes.
Yes, with no word. So, Parrish Turner has very kindly agreed to come and join me and answer a whole bunch of questions about the strike, what's going on, what you need to know about it, how to support it, how this relates to the wider publishing industry. So, we're going to talk about all of this, and I appreciate it. Parrish is a queer essayist and editor originally from Georgia who works at HarperCollins and is a member of the HarperCollins Union. His writing focuses on gender, sexuality, spirituality, regionality, and more. Turner's work has been featured on BuzzFeed, Slate, Culture Trip, Gertrude Press, and The Rumpus. With his fellow playwrights, he was honored with the Metro Atlanta Theater Award for his work on the musical By Wheel and by Wing. And Turner was a 2014 Lambda Literary Fellow and received his MFA from the New School in 2017. He currently lives in Brooklyn and is always on the lookout for a great cup of tea, which sounds love. I have tea myself today.
Yes.
So
I'm home with my family now, and I didn't bring this tea that I've just found and love, and I debated, and I'm so sad with the decision I made to leave it in Brooklyn.
if only. Well, welcome. Thank you so much for coming on to talk to everybody. I appreciate it.
No, I'm really happy to be here, and thank you for helping spread the word and get information out.
Of course. Yeah, whatever we can do. So for anybody who's used to my live streams, I'm going to be less engaged with the comments section than usual. But I think if you have burning questions, we'll save a little bit of time, or if people have like specific questions they want to ask, we can answer them. But to start off, Parrish, can you talk a little bit about what you do at HarperCollins and maybe a bit about your experience with income and how that relates to living in some place like New York City?
Yes. Yes. So I am an editorial assistant, and that's the entry-level job for Editorial, the editorial track in publishing. I have been working with Harper for like a year and a half now, but I have a lot of experience in the world of books. At Harper, I am in children's. I primarily work on picture books, but I work on some middle grade and YA as well. Chapter books here and there, kind of depending. Right. And I previously have worked for Lambda Literary. I was a book editor for a travel website for a minute. I've interned and freelanced all over the place. I've also done some stints in nonprofit. And just before starting at HarperCollins, I worked for McNally Jackson as the children's book buyer, and was part of the unionizing effort there. So I've both worked as starting a union, but also HarperCollins has a very established union. We've been around for 80 years. We unionized in 1942.
And the only major publisher with a union, I believe.
Correct. And so it's both unusual in that like the union's been around for so long and that there's a union at all. And that's one of the things that I think is important when talking about how our strike impacts the larger publishing industry. Because I think a lot of the things that we're bringing up and asking for are things that there is a call for across the industry.
Yeah.
But we're the only publishing house with a union with an avenue to directly ask for these things. It's much harder to kind of say, hey, we across the board are getting underpaid without the structure of a union.
Right.
It really gives us the structure and a way to shape these conversations.
Sure. That makes a lot of sense. And for your entry into this position as an editorial assistant, what kind of income currently does that look like? And is that something that is livable in New York City?
So the starting salary for HarperCollins is currently $45K a year. I did get a raise this year of 2%, so I now make $45,900. Which,
is something.
It's something. It's better than nothing. I have personally, and I've written about this previously, I am an exceptionally good budgeter. And I also don't have student debt. I went to school on a full ride scholarship. and was just very fortunate in being able to do that. I think that it is barely livable, but it is. Um, but what do we say is livable? I can't afford to eat out.
Mhm.
I'm not a big drinker personally, but I also can't afford to drink more than I do,
Mhm.
just because, like, I would love to go out and do happy hour or even, like, sometimes late night drinks. I can't afford to do drinks that are not on a happy hour special. Um, and I don't think that's why they should give us a raise. It's more, um, I can't even afford to buy books to use as comparative books, and that's such a big part of what editorial should be doing, is reading beyond just what's getting submitted, but going out and supporting the wider landscape and reading and seeing what other people are putting out. Um,
Right.
and a picture book is $20, and that is one dinner if I eat out, more if I get, like, takeout or eat in,
Yeah.
and cook myself. Um,
And then if somebody has student loan debt or has a
mhm.
child.
Yeah, I there are people who have children, and I am just forever in awe of them and their what they're doing. Just I think parenthood is amazing and cool, but also the I can't imagine the budgetary side of it.
Right.
A lot of people, it is very common in publishing for people to have rich partners who work in finance, tech, or something, but that's not a fair expectation to have. And that will especially impact marginalized communities, um, in extra ways.
Right.
Especially queer women tend to have there's a stereotype of the, like, dual income, no kids, gay couple. Queer women are impacted because there's two women who are getting paid the 75 cents to an hour, to a dollar ratio, so it's compounding.
Right.
There's job discrimination, across the board. So if your partner is not a white banker,
Right.
and it's not fair that people should have to have a partner to be able to afford this job.
Right.
Um, and I think it's great for people who do. Like, it's no one's at fault for falling in love with who they fall in
Of
love with,
course.
or
Of course.
uh, but it's a tricky overlapping impacts of how these end up rippling out. Of, if I need money to cover my student debt and pay my food bills and pay for rent, um, I so many of my peers have roommates, and I think that's great. I love roommates, and that shouldn't be a requirement for the job.
Right.
If people want to live with roommates in their, like, 40s, love it. Should they have to live with roommates in their 40s? No.
No. Well, and, talking about the fact that publishing is a professional job where people often have graduate level education, and these are the salaries.
Yes.
Yeah.
They're highly educated, and it's also a very specialized field.
Right.
There's this conversation that gets bandied around that I think management loves to lean into of, there are 10 people out the door who would be killed to have your job. And I think that's true. And it takes a long time to train someone for any of these jobs. It's a very much an apprenticeship model, where you're gonna have to learn on the job a lot of the skills. And once those skills are taught, that's so valuable, but it's not being valued by the company. The retention of publishing in general is very low. Um, I believe it averages, there's a 30% attrition rate, which is very high. Most industries, like, don't want more than, like, 10%. And so the fact there's that level of turnover in publishing, um, but that's just what is operating normal. And we're
Yeah.
trying to stand up and say
It shouldn't be.
it shouldn't be normal.
Yeah.
People
Yeah.
should be able to do this job and hold on to that institutional knowledge, which is so valuable.
Yes. Absolutely. And I've seen so many people talking about how they've exited the industry because they couldn't afford
Mhm.
to live that way. So let's talk a little bit about unions. I know you have some experience with or union organizing previously. For anybody who's not super familiar with them, can you talk a little bit about what a union is, how it works, and maybe a little bit about the Harper Collins Union specifically?
Yeah, so a union is basically a group of workers who are coming to the table together to say, we would like to be treated fairly. We're going to work together in order to ask for more for all of us. And whether more is, I think about the rail workers, and they just want like a handful of sick days.
Yeah.
And I often point to one of the things I love about unions is some of the reasons people give for why there's racial disparities and gender disparities in who gets paid what is because white men are more likely to ask for a raise. Let's just say for the point of this discussion that that's true. I think there's more at play there, but I think that's a factor. I've definitely known white men to be much more eager to ask for a raise than various other demographics. But what if instead of asking for a raise for me, I was asking for a raise for everyone? And we got put into the contract that we all get raises at a certain interval so that none of my coworkers get left behind because they aren't outgoing. Because that's often what it comes down to, is a personality of who's willing to like put themselves out there and say, hey, give me the raise. And to me, unions are a great way to address some of those systemic issues, because if we get people treated equally, we're able to better take care of everyone.
Right.
And especially the amount of people that I talk to that have imposter syndrome, and they're like, oh, I'm not worth more. I'm like, do you think I'm worth more? Will you ask for more for me? Then, and I'll ask for more for you.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not, I'm not good at asking for raises for myself and advocating for myself. I'm okay, but I'm just going to give myself like a B on that skill set. But if we can come together and say, hey, this is not okay for all of us.
Yeah.
That's a much more effective tactic, I think, for demanding better from an industry.
Yeah.
I can explain a little bit for folks who are interested in unionizing their own workplace. The like Cliff Notes version of that is talk quietly to your coworkers until you can get a majority or supermajority of people who would be like in for a union, partner with a larger union, and then you file with the NLRB that you are interested in forming a union. Your management can say, sure, you have a union. They rarely do. Then it goes to a vote, and that's what you hear a lot more. And hopefully the vote passes to form a union. And you've seen a lot of these headlines for like Amazon and things, and Starbucks and all these places that are unionizing. But the whisper network of people who are wanting to unionize their workplaces in all sorts of fields, including book publishing. A lot of the indie bookstores in New York are unionizing if they haven't already. That's just an ongoing conversation. And the more, I would love to see more of publishing unionized, because the more strength you have.
Right.
New York City's hotels are all unionized.
Oh, wow.
Hotel workers make a good living. I would make more if I worked at a hotel as a front desk worker, maid. And I think those are very great jobs. I'm very glad they're getting that money. And it just is the power of the collective bargaining to be able to raise everyone up.
Right. So for the HarperCollins Union, what is the union asking for?
So we have three main tiers of what we're asking for, which is higher pay, diversity initiatives and diversity proposals, and union security. At the end of the day, we think all of these are diversity points, but they are kind of different asks as far as the company is concerned. These are the three sticking points that we're still outstanding with the union. We've been negotiating for about a year before coming to this point where we're on strike. We did a one-day strike back in June or July, I think June, and then have done the indefinite strike now. Yeah, in the middle,
and are nearing a month in winter. Yeah,
we've been. it's tricky how you do the calculations because bid on strike for a month, like a calendar month,
Right.
but we only count working days. So
Okay.
like Thanksgiving, the week of Thanksgiving, that was only 2 days on strike or 3 days on strike,
Okay.
versus we started the strike on November 10th.
Okay.
So,
But still, day 29, I mean, that's basically a month, even
yeah,
with working days.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of work that has gone undone. And they're trying to hire temps, and please don't take any of these temp jobs because publishing is a relational business. People are going to remember if you got your start at Harper Collins in December of 2022, you know. But also, I think they can hire all the temps they want. I was still learning pretty basic stuff a year in. Publishing doesn't tend to have very clear ways of training people because of that apprenticeship model. And so it can be hard to get people up to speed on all of the systems, all of the nuances, and let alone what individual people, the way they like things done. And part of why you do a strike is so that work doesn't get done, but it does break our hearts that
Yeah.
we love our work. We want to
Right.
be there doing it. It's why we're fighting so hard to be able to put in place systems that will allow us to stay at our jobs.
Right.
Because right now it is only sustainable for a select few to work in publishing long term.
Yeah. I mean, I think what I've seen a lot of is this thing of passion doesn't pay the bills, as much as you love it at some point, like you have to make some decisions. And I think that's definitely difficult.
Yeah.
Um, oh, this is actually a good question. Is the Canadian division of HarperCollins also on strike, or is it?
Yeah. So the
Okay.
Canadian is not, as well as technically Harlequin is owned by Harper, but they are not part of the union.
Okay.
And I think Avon might not be part of the union as well. There's some strange stuff because we've been around for so long, like what positions are in the union, what aren't, is a little messy. And especially the history of why. So they are not, this is only a HarperCollins US strike.
Okay.
And the members of the union are primarily assistants. And how long, and this is true across all unions. It basically, if you are a manager, if you have people who report to you, if you have the ability to hire or fire, or access to sensitive financial documents. So executive assistants technically don't hire or fire, but they do have access to sensitive documents that management would not want the union to have. So there's like a issue of my brain's saying loyalty, and that's not quite right. They cannot be in the union. And where that cutoff is varies department to department. One of the departments that you can stay in the union for the longest is production and managing ed, and that you can be a senior managing editor and still be in the union. In the editorial, basically editor, the title of editor is where you leave the union. And so it varies who all is in the office. And so it's not just, there's been implication that's, it's just the assistants, like everything's getting done. And assistants do a lot. So not everything's getting done.
Yeah.
But also the importance of the production and man ed departments is often unsung. And they are really the people who keep the ship moving. I explained to non-publishing people that the closest equivalent is a project manager. And anyone who works in tech knows how crucial a project manager is to work getting done.
Yeah.
And so the fact that those people are out is definitely, the company is feeling that.
Yeah, for sure.
I think my bosses are doing okay without me. The company is not doing okay without these managing ed people.
Okay. So I've heard some people talking about this like 5,000 increase number. Is that the wage increase that is for this
base?
Base? Okay.
So we have a tiered system. of each job has a level attached to it if it's in the union. And we are asking for, but it's easiest to talk about that base level because it's so low to begin with. And we're asking for a still very low number. Living wage in New York is considered to be $55K a year, and we're asking for 50. And one of the issues that has happened is these higher levels, the wages don't reflect what the market rate is.
Mm-hmm.
So people at level, weirdly, it starts at level 3. People at level 5, 5 or 6 are getting hired in at these much higher rates. And the company is asking to have only about $2,000 between each level. And yet, and I'm not going to get the exact right numbers. I think we're asking for, I don't know, but I know they're hiring in people at that like level 6 at like 65, 70K, but wanting to offer internal people who get promoted only 55. And so we want to make sure that we're addressing that wage compression that can happen over time as we raise the bottom. If we don't adjust the upper levels, we're not helping people who've
been there
and been loyal to Harper.
Right.
And wanted to stay with the company. The story is throughout publishing that if you want to raise, you have to move companies. And we don't think that should have to be the case. That institutional knowledge of the company itself even is so important, of how things run, what came out 5 years ago, and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so where are things at right now for the union? There was an open letter from Brian Murray that said a lot of things.
And we sent a letter in response that was published on XOXO Publishing. So I know it's out there. If I think we just sent it internally technically, but it got shared larger, where we addressed a lot of the things that he mentioned, and how we thought it was disingenuous in some of the claims it was making. And we wanted to address a lot of them. And we think what we're asking for is so bare minimum that it's very frustrating that we've been fighting this hard. We definitely know people are listening to us and we are being heard, whether or not they want to acknowledge it.
Yeah.
Because that was kind of the first we had heard from anyone.
Harper Collins at all. Yeah.
They had changed our work from home policy while we were on strike, and they are supposed to consult the union for any major changes to the workplace like that. So we did have one very short meeting about that wasn't particularly informative. We bargained, and the way bargaining works is you kind of have to offer counter proposals. If the way you barter is not just saying like, no, you say, well, could you take $20 for that lamp?
Right.
Our last session, we offered what we thought was a very fair path to resolution. And they basically just said no. They didn't offer any counter proposals. So we feel like the ball is in their court, and legally it is, to offer some sort of counter proposals, adjustments, anything like that. So they say they're willing to come to the table, but for us to come to the table, we would need to bring some sort of counter proposals to our own proposals. It would be bargaining against ourselves.
Yeah, no.
It makes no sense.
So if they're willing to come, they should come with a proposal.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And and we've shown how much support we have. I think it just came out that the American Library Association did a little poll, and I think about 80% of literary agents are like totally on our side, and
That's great.
People are like, don't have an opinion. A very small percentage are like, you're doing a bad thing, and I understand, because it is impeding their work, and we feel that's not our fault, it's Harper's.
Right.
Because even if the turnover that you see in publishing because of this, it leaves authors and readers in a bad state. The amount of times that a book gets orphaned.
Yeah.
So if an editor leaves to go to another house, leaves the publishing industry in general, that person's passion for that book that they leave behind might not be replicable on the team,
Yeah.
but it will get reassigned to someone who will do their best. But I've had my editors get assigned books where I'm like, were you the best person on the team to take over this book? Because it doesn't make sense for you.
Yes, thank you, Alexa. I know you have some experience with this, or publicists
Mhm.
leaving in the middle of like right before a launch.
It
I've
just
seen this
falls through
happen.
the cracks so easily, and that, I think, is bad for business. There's already been so much money put into these books,
Right.
and for that to just disappear because one of these crucial links disappears from the chain for very real reasons. People need to get paid. They still need to put food on the table.
Yes. So I wanted to respond to this. Theories on why HarperCollins is letting the strike go on for 29 days for literally the bare minimum. It doesn't make sense to me. Isn't this bad for them? I think there is an answer to this. So,
There is a perception in people who work in management overall. This is not like a publishing or Harper thing, that if they wait us out, we'll give up. And in New York State, if you are on strike for over 2 weeks, you're eligible for unemployment. We have our strike fund, which
mhm.
is being used by people who have bigger expenses, things that come up, unexpected expenses, and the union pays a small strike pay stipend. I financially am making as much as I make normally,
Wow.
um, which is more just reflective of how little I
I
make.
mean, reflective of how little you guys get paid. Yeah.
And so we don't have a strong motivation to go back,
Right.
because that's the easiest thing to point to as to why we would give up and go back. Um, and we don't want to. We really believe in this, and we don't think it's like, what would we give up for? Especially now, we're really in the groove. We do so. All of the raises we're asking for is a little under $1 million a year,
Hmm.
which is, for a company the size of Harper, we think is
Not
a
that much. Yeah.
and we estimate that by early December, early January, which we suspect will be on strike until early January just because the holidays, um, the company will have saved as much money with having not paying us because we're on strike as they would spend on the raises we would get.
Wow.
Um, so for us, it makes no sense. I think they're thinking that if they just wear us down, we'll eventually give up, and that's just not the case. And we are really hurt because Harper has a stated purpose of their like business mission is to be author focused. And we think this is hurting authors. Um, the work that we're not doing there in the office, the stuff that's not getting done. We think Harper is now failing their stated mission.
Right.
And that's a shame.
It
And it's
is.
very frustrating.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and we think we feel like we have the support from authors and other people in the industry that they understand why we're doing this, that it is a temporary discomfort for a longer term gain.
Hmm.
Um, but it's still hard.
Yeah. Of course. So, for people who are hearing all of this, what can they do to support the strike? What are some specific ways that people, depending on kind of their status, can support
Mhm.
what you all are doing?
Yeah, so we've got I first off always recommend people check out our Instagram, both because it's got great memes,
Hmm.
got a great team working on it. But
Yeah.
that's where we use that as our primary form of getting information out. Um, we have broken down different ways you can help depending on who you are in the industry. If you are just an avid reader, normal person, and really everyone I think fits into this category.
Yeah.
Even if you do
We're all avid readers.
we have a petition of support that I think last I saw, we were at 12,500 signatures on, which is amazing. I never would have thought we would have gotten that many signatures, and I like get emotional thinking about it. But also share on your own personal social media and in your own circles. For people like you, Bethany, and kind of the bookstagrammers, book talkers, booktubers, all of that. We are asking for people to hold their reviews of Harper books until we get a contract. Yeah. We think this will create a big flurry of media because people will already be talking about Harper when we get a contract. Yeah. And that includes holding on your end of year lists. A lot of people have chosen to kind of make their graphics and swap out the book covers with I support the Harper Collins Union logo. Yeah. And we know this is hard, especially as we didn't think that this was going to go on this long. Yeah. And we love our books. So we don't think this is about, we don't want anyone going on Goodreads and saying anything. Like, we want these books to do so well. And we love them and talk about them. Just don't post about them. We are asking for agents to not submit books to HarperCollins at this time. We are asking for no new contracts with Harper. Stuff that was already in progress, because also people don't realize how slow publishing is. If the terms were all agreed to prior to the strike, that's okay. But just nothing new until we have our contract to slow business. I think that's the main categories. Authors, also really anyone can do this. Authors and agents, people can write into HarperCollins and say you support the union and that you think this is silly. They've let it go on whatever language you use. Sometimes I'll point to Brianna Karzu, who's a picture book author, illustrator, is very supportive of the union. She has great letters that she'll post to her Instagram so you can see what someone else is saying. I think she writes, if not weekly, like daily, if not weekly, like, she's great. And also her picture book is adorable. It's her one that's out right now is called Lou, about a fire hydrant, who is the neighborhood dog bathroom. And he just feels like there's something more inside of him. And it's, no. It's so cute. Oh, it's cute. I highly, highly recommend it. But also check out her Instagram, both for her picture book stuff and her, I think she's just a great example of language you can use. We like to put out example language as well on our social media.
Yeah. And I know I've seen links to like images that can be used for social media posts. And
we've also just launched, I think early last week, a bookshop link that would support our hardship fund. So if you're buying holiday books, I think at this point, nothing's going to arrive for Christmas, but it will arrive soon after.
Or if you're just buying books for yourself.
Yes.
As we do.
I love Bookshop is a great alternative to the big one.
Right.
Bookshop is great. You can support us, but also once the strike is over, support your local indie bookstore or find an indie bookstore that sounds cool. Yes. I sometimes will set mine to like some tiny bookstore in the middle of nowhere. Just be like, well, send some money their way. It gives a percentage of all the sales to indie bookstores.
I love it. I don't know if this is something y'all have thought about or reached out about, but just an idea. Libra FM also lets you pick indie bookstores to donate to. I wonder if you might reach out to them.
I love Libra FM. Yeah, I still use my bookseller account with them. But they're great.
They are great. But I just wonder if maybe the union could set up something with them.
It's a good idea. Yeah. We might have to see. We'll see how long this continues to go on for.
Right.
I also know we have a TikTok account coming.
Love it.
If it's not already started, I'm not sure what the status is on that. Okay. We basically, and that's also, we're a very organized group, especially at this point. We have two main branches of people. We have a lot of people who work remote and people who are able to come in to the office. We've been asking people on a rotating schedule. You're not out there all day, every day. It is way too cold right now to do that. Yeah. But doing a classic picket line where we're walking in a circle in front of the building and shouting or just walking because it's been so cold. And that's very effective and an important piece of strike. But honestly, the remote team and all they're doing is so valuable. They're doing great organizational work. If you email us with questions or anything, they're probably the ones that are going to talk to you and put you in contact with the right people. And bless them for the work they do.
Yes. And you can donate to the strike fund, which again is helping to cover costs for people.
Yeah.
I don't know if these are available outside of in person, but like I have a cool t-shirt I got.
Yes, I have my t-shirt as well. We're working on figuring out how to make that logistically possible.
Okay.
That's a little tricky.
Yeah.
But we're also
But if you're
brainstorming
in the
all
New York
the
City
ways.
area and you
Much
go
more
to join
feasible.
them, much more feasible.
Yeah, we can
Yeah.
arrange. Let us know ahead of time because I don't think we're bringing the shirts on a normal day. We had a big strike, big rally Friday where we had
Yes.
them all, which was great. The amount of people we had for the terrible weather was
The weather
was
was so bad, but it was great.
so
It was really good.
my gloves were soaked through, and I'm doing laundry right now, and I'm realizing those gloves should have been in the laundry, but that's fine. It's one of those days.
It happens. So those are all some things. Let me see. I have a couple questions. Okay, so hardly pay attention to publishers when buying books. Should we not be buying books from them?
Buy the books. Buy all the
books.
books. Because not buying the books primarily hurts the authors, and we absolutely do not want that. We want authors to get their money, and we also want Harper to have money to hire us back with, like to bring us back on with. We don't want this to be hurting that side of the bottom line of Harper. We think that's an important part of the flow. And also we think that's not a realistic thing to. My mother is in a book club, and every month she asks if I can get an employee discount on her book of the month. And she has no idea if they're Harper books or not. Because just understanding how imprints work.
It takes a while to figure it out. Yeah.
It takes a while to learn. For people who are reviewing it, the inside cover with all the data and the Library of Congress stuff, that will say Harper Collins somewhere on there. So you can figure out, but buy all the books.
Yeah. And if you're ever unsure, you can also Google the imprint and it'll tell you what the parent company is.
The amount I had to do that as a book buyer to figure out where to acquire a book from, just being like, who owns this one? Who?
Yes, because there's so many. I know there's a list somewhere. So just to make sure, Holding Reviews includes reviews for imprints under Harper Collins.
Yes.
Okay.
So that includes all of I think some of the biggest ones. William Morrow, I think, is like the biggest imprint that doesn't have Harper in the name of it.
Right.
Catherine Teigen books. I'm more familiar with the children's side of things.
I have wondered because I know I've been holding with like Harlequin and Karina because they are technically under Harper Collins, but
I would have to double check on that.
I know they are on the whatever list there is that's been put out about the Harper
If they're
Collins
on the list, then trust the list of because
okay. So Harper Collins, Karina Press, Avon, those are for, I know I read a lot of romance, and so I know for some of you, those are some big romance ones. Yeah, I guess one question I have too, because I've seen a couple of different things. I saw somebody recently from the union talk about with end of year lists, the possibility of saying a book while talking about the union. Is that something that could be?
And so that's one of the things that I think is some of the ways that I personally, Parrish, think it's okay to kind of work around is if you've got a listicle of your end of year books and you've got, title of book, author, description of the book. For a Harper book, instead of the description, just say Harper is on strike. This will come TBD.
Yeah.
This part will come further. So you know the name of it, but I'm not saying why I like it.
Okay.
That's kind of coming further. And so I think that's a way to kind of massage it
Yeah, it's
And even
tricky because it's like
yeah.
all of us are getting ready to do our end of year videos and
Oh,
everything, and
yeah, yeah,
I'm looking at my, I'm like, I have a few Harper titles that
yeah.
are definitely on my
And
list.
one of the things
So
I'm also saying is, like, here's a chance, an excuse to do 2 end of year books.
that's
Once the
true.
the Harper contract comes, you can be like, "Here's all the Harper books I didn't get to talk about before."
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Um, and so even kind of saying, like, "Look forward to this video when the time comes, where I'll get to talk more in depth about these."
yeah,
Um, Brianna, to point to her again, is a good example of even when she has posted about just excitement about her book, which she's an author. She's like, "Do it." We're
yeah,
not
of
asking
course,
authors to not talk about their own
of
books.
course.
Um, but at the bottom of the post, she'll do a little like, "And Harper's still on strike." Just to help people remember that this is still an ongoing thing.
Yes,
Because I think it's very easy. We've been working hard to not slip under people's notice as this has gotten more of a routine thing.
yeah,
Like, we're all in the routine of being on strike, which I didn't want to be. Like,
yeah,
none of us want to be on strike. This is not
no,
a like. It's an exciting and cool thing to feel like we're trying to make change, but it's not fun to be on strike.
right,
I'd rather be working right now, as
yeah.
fun as this conversation is. Um,
Rather be talking about the books you want to work on,
yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
and actually, getting some of that stuff done, and even the minutia of the job, I enjoy.
yeah.
And I also want to be able to pay my bills.
Also good. Yeah, and longer term as well.
Yeah.
Question, is a program like Harlequin's Romance includes you mentorship something I should not
Mhm.
apply to?
I think you should imply, because that hopefully is a longer term thing than our strike. Hopefully, by the time that they even let you know if you got in, we will not be on strike. Knock
Yeah.
on wood, finding wood. Um, and we don't, those types of things are, I think, part of a larger ecosystem that we're not trying to disrupt the whole ecosystem.
Right.
We're trying to be very focused on what gets disrupted. Um, and so trying to help keep people's attention on the strike, on the workers, and these amazing books that we would love to be talking about more.
Yeah.
Hopefully that mentorship program, hopefully we're not striking for that long.
Yeah. Let's hope. Let's hope.
Yeah.
Um, let's see. So appreciate the support, not posting good reviews on Goodreads or StarGraph until the strike is over, checking out HarperCollins books from the library instead of buying. Using your library, I think is great, but I think they are also saying
Yeah.
you
Go
can
ahead and don't
definitely
feel
go
like
ahead
you
and
can't buy
purchase
the
them.
books, but also I
Right.
love my library.
Yeah.
Like, and I don't make enough money to buy my own books. Like, I use the library so much.
Yeah.
So like, I'm never going to tell people to not use their library, because I think libraries are so important. And even checking out a book from the library does help a book in its lifetime, because libraries track how often books get checked out or taken off shelves and perused and things, and that is helpful for the ecosystem.
Yeah.
I think libraries are so underrated, even though all book people love them so much. I still think they don't get enough credit.
That's true. Libraries are amazing.
They'll never get enough
Um,
credit in my
yeah.
book.
Yeah. So this is a question that is something else I wanted to talk about. How are other publishers reacting to this strike? And then also, I just
Mm,
generally want to talk about the impact on the wider publishing industry because we've touched on this a little bit before, but low wages are not just a HarperCollins problem.
mm.
They are an industry-wide problem.
Yeah, and our hope is that we saw a bunch of raises happen in 2020 throughout houses, and it's really an internal competition issue. Once Penguin raises their prices, everyone else will got to keep up with Penguin Random House, and so that's part of our motivation in this strike, is to raise everyone up because we have this avenue of doing so.
Right.
Our hope is that everyone will be able to see benefits from some of the things we're asking for, and that they will ripple out. We know we've gotten a lot of support from other editors and houses and other publishing employees. We have not heard from any sort of management of other houses, so I can't speak to that, but I know the whole industry has its eyes on Harper.
Yeah.
So
Well, and I went to the rally and I, saw Macmillan employees I know, I saw
Mhm.
authors I know, I mean, so
I
there's
know we've had
definitely,
people come out from all the major and some of the minor
yeah,
offices, the New York ones. We're not asking anyone to like fly in or anything like that.
right.
And even internally, we've got a lot of support of people who are um, not protected by the union to be able to strike. Um, and there's some like nuances of how union protections work there, but are very supportive of the strike and are even internally, we're asking people to try not to work with strikers. If you're an author, you can email if your editor is still working. You can email them and say, "I do not want to work with a temp. I don't want a temp working on my stuff. I don't want any scabs touching my work."
Mm,
Um, and that's a great way to kind of let them know that, like, in a real way, that you
yeah,
are supporting the strikers, um, and you don't want stuff farmed out to someone who is scabbing.
right. Absolutely. So this is interesting. Could raising pay cause a raise in book prices? We agree it would be worth it, but curious.
So book prices are already rising, and we are not getting paid more. And they are the way I kind of explain it is like inflation is affecting everything. Paper costs have been rising, and we have known for a long time that book prices were going to rise because of that. Interestingly, a lot of that has to do with the rise of e-commerce and Amazon. More paper is being dedicated to cardboard boxes
Oh,
than like pieces of paper for books to be printed on.
interesting.
Um, and especially that like mid to lower tier pulp. I'm fascinated by this stuff. So like, I mean,
I
agree on that. It would take such a minor cut to one particular person's salary that is public information, to cover all
to
of these
cover
things.
all the costs. Yeah.
So book prices are rising, period. And that is not being reflected in our salaries. And that's kind of one of the things we're kind of saying is like, look, the cost of the paper is going up. The cost of what we need to pay authors is going up. The cost of labor internally is going up, whether or
Mm,
not you acknowledge it. We're going to make it happen.
right.
Um, and I do think the nuances of how much things are going to rise, I'd love to talk about. And, the paperback versus hardback, I think is such an interesting conversation, because I want books to be accessible. And that's also why I think libraries are great. Whenever people are like, the costs are too high, I'm like, library. It will, it has a bigger impact on the book than people realize if it's an active library pick. Um, it's still a huge impact as opposed to illegally downloading something. Like libraries exist. You can get ebooks, audiobooks, and the
Yes.
physical book at the library. Um,
Yep.
and and authors still get royalties. It looks a little different than if you bought the book, but
Yep.
I love the library. So I think book prices are going up in the next couple of years. I think we're only starting to see it on the consumer side. I just know um, they had approved like a year ago. They approved raising book prices for books coming out in like 2023 and
Okay.
2024 and beyond. Um, and so we're kind of saying like, look, if the prices of everything else is going up,
So should
please
your labor.
also
Yeah.
increase. I have 9% inflation right now.
Yeah.
Like I just moved, so I'm not personally affected by this rent hike, but my old apartment, they're raising the rent from a 3-bedroom from 2,100 a month to 2,800 a month. How they're supposed to pay for that, I don't know.
Yeah.
My old roommates are all gonna have to move, and that sucks.
Yeah. Rent is a lot everywhere, but in New York City especially, it's astronomical and
Yeah.
yeah.
I have an amazing deal, and I pay 1,550 for a studio, and I do think that's an amazing deal in New York.
Yeah.
And my
Well,
sister
and
pays less for a
we
two-bedroom.
yeah, that's the thing is, like, it's wild because we have, my spouse is a university professor, so we have 50% subsidized
Hmm.
rates, which is great, but still for a two-bedroom, two-bath with kids, we're paying, like 3,300 a month.
Yeah.
So that's like it's wild. I
It's
think a
expensive
lot of people who
everywhere.
don't live here don't realize
Yeah.
how much it really is.
And I cannot find another studio in my area for under 19, I would think.
Yeah.
And it's absurd. And they don't, one of the things we're asking for that we consider under diversity is the right to remote work. We've proven that we can do it over the past years, and they don't want to give it to us. And they also don't want to pay us a New York living wage. So I'm like, I would like both.
Yeah.
Please give me both. But you could spark a conversation by saying, we'll give you one for the other. Like,
but they're not doing that.
They're not even doing that. And I'm like, well, look.
Yeah.
Because could I live on what I make in Boise? Probably pretty well. I hear great things about Boise. I don't know why Boise is the one that comes to mind, but there are so many great cities that have a lower cost of living. I'm from Atlanta, and unfortunately, Atlanta's cost of living has risen so much in the past like 3-4 years that I don't think I could live here. But I'm visiting my parents for context of that here. And it's the math is not fun.
Right. Well as the fact that, if remote jobs were an option, it would open the door to a lot more people and increase the opportunity for diversity. So I think absolutely.
That's the amount of people that I think it's fine to live with your parents. I don't want you to have to live with your parents. I want it to be a choice. And to be able to live in, and I think one of my big sticking points with the diversity thing is, yes, we can talk about marginalized backgrounds, low income backgrounds, but also the tastes of Atlanta, of Boise, of LA are all different. And we are really tailoring so many books to New York City tastes. And I think the publishing industry is worse off for that.
Yeah.
I think there are so many beautiful, interesting books that would do amazing regionally or even just rural tastes versus, New York's a mega city. It's not even a city.
Yeah.
It is a mega city. And so the amount of times where I will look, I spent a lot of time in rural Georgia when I was younger, and seeing just what it truly means to live somewhere rural reflected in books is hard to find. And like, as most, you get like these like pastoral, beautiful books. But sometimes I want like a fart comedy book set in a rural area. Like, I work in children's books, so what I think of,
right, yeah.
It just, there's so much out there that we're losing out on by being so New York focused.
Yeah.
That I would love to see that change.
That's so interesting.
Knock on wood.
Does anybody else have any questions? We are closing in on an hour, so we're probably going to wrap it up soon. But if you have any burning questions, let me know. Alexa is saying sales are down. Hardcover sales in Q4 are depressing. Okay, well,
and that's true. It's a like it's really inflation, I think, more than a recession. But like these things impact each other. And it's one of those where they're using that kind of stuff as an excuse. And whilst sales are down, we have had record-breaking 2020, 2021. So sales are down to like their 2019 average.
Okay. So yeah.
So like, yes, they are down, but the ways we talk about this and book sales have been on the rise for many years, have been kind of going up. More people are reading. I'm very happy about it. Children's in particular has been rising a lot. Much slower. We had such a spike in 2020 of people just being home and needing to read, that it's kind of unfair to do these comparisons. Just the past couple of years have been so weird on so many levels that it's really hard to talk accurately about some of these numbers.
Right. Oh, this is so interesting. Your paperback is selling super well. That's great.
Well, and that's part of it is we need to have a conversation about when do we put out paperbacks. Because there is, I know every author wants to hold their hardcover book, but sometimes a book just needs to be in paperback the whole way through. It's a harder sell to authors. I get it. But that's an ongoing conversation that I think is shifting, and talking about how paperbacks are more accessible.
Yeah. Any predictions on what the future has to bring in terms of the HarperCollins strike and the publishing industry in general because of the strike?
I am an optimistic person that I've learned to accept that about myself because I was an angsty teenager, and so I don't want to think of myself as an optimistic person. So when I say what my predictions, I do feel strongly that this is the way things kind of have to go. But I do think we're going to get things like remote work. I do think wages are going to have to rise, partly because at least at HarperCollins we're demanding it. Like we're not giving them an option.
Yeah.
And the rest of the industry is going to have to keep up with that, raise their own prices for how much they're willing to pay people, because these skills are directly transferable. I have a friend who's I think of picture books as poetic little instruction manuals for life for kids. I have a friend who works on actual instruction manuals, and he probably makes $70K a year. My skills are 100% transferable to that.
Yeah.
And so we want to create an industry where people can afford to make these incredible books and be able to spend their time this way. And it not just be a specific, because you can see in the books the tastes that these decision makers have, because it's one type of person.
Well,
and I'm learning how to reach those other demographics and get those people in the door and to stay. But it's a rough learning curve.
Yeah. Well, I've also thought, because, you talk about like marketing and publicity, the disparity in what people in New York City make in those fields, if they're not doing publishing, is wildly different. I mean, starting salaries are, 70, 80,000 a year.
Yeah. I was talking to someone where I was like, what? Literally, and I mean this in the best way. Why do you work in publishing? Because your job 100% is transferable. The exact same things you're doing, you could do to sell anything. And they're passionate. They want to work here. And a good publicist earns their keep. Like, absolutely. So it's absurd that we're underpaying people. Yeah. Because we need those people so bad.
Yeah. Well, and I think also it's hampering like people who might be interested in the industry. I mean, like I know I've considered it, and I'm like, I don't know, like I love books. I talk about books all the time, but like the income is so low. I don't know,
Yeah. Oh, and a lot of us, especially, I think publishing can be a little cult-like.
Yeah.
Where all of your friends are in the industry, they're all on the same wavelength. And it's so helpful. One of the things I always recommend publishing people, have friends that don't work in publishing, because you need someone to keep your head on straight about the absurdity that goes on in publishing. And you need someone who react like, I'm sorry, what? When you tell them stories, just to keep your head on straight. And part of that is to help you realize, a lot of people are realizing now that they're like on the picket line, they've been away from work for a minute and had a minute to breathe and to not be working overtime all the time on all these books, to go, oh, there is more to life than books. And I love books. Like, books are my life. And I think it's important to cultivate other areas of your life as well. And once you break away from that and you go like, man, I was talking to a guy recently who's a lawyer and has a second house. Like, obviously lawyer and second house is like next level stuff.
Right.
But I'm like, could the happiness I miss out on by not working on book sale every day be helped by a hot tub at my weekend house? Like,
maybe.
And I think maybe for a while, and I'm like getting older. It's because most editorial assistants are 22. And you're like, yeah, I can absolutely eat ramen if it means I get to work on books. And that's like less cute when you're 30.
Yeah.
And you're much more willing to have those serious conversations. And I think once people are parents, they do that. Once people are older or realize they want to buy a place and all these little things,
it changes what you're willing to do.
What you're
Dana, yes.
Yeah.
I know. I want to see, I think that's part of why I want to support the strike as well, is I know this and I know what it's like to live here, and I want to see a more diverse industry, better paid publishing professionals because I think the work is valuable and the companies are making profits that should get passed along to the
Yeah.
very talented people that are.
And I think the profits are different than, I mean, economics is a wild field. And the profits are different than if you work at Facebook. Those profit margins, they're higher than they should be. They're overpaying. There's bubbles. The whole crypto stuff. You can see the bubble pop, another bubble of crypto popping.
Yeah.
And publishing has much more steady profits. It's much less boom and bust than other industries. But people love to see a boom.
Right.
And so I think that's part of why these big wigs at these our company's owned by Rupert Murdoch. I think he's looking at his pay books and going, he's not seeing those boom numbers in publishing. It must not be that profitable. And it's like, I'm sorry, we're not making you personally multi millions. We're giving you steady returns. Like, and that's what's hard. There's a lot that will need to shift in the economics of publishing, I think, in the long run. But it's going to happen one way or another.
Yep.
And we'd love for the people who are putting the most work in to be seeing the profits of that.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So everybody go check out
our Instagram,
Twitter.
Union at all the things.
Yep. Go post, support if you're able to, donate to the strike fund. And thank you so much, Parrish, for joining.
Yes. Treat yourself to a book.
Yeah, go treat yourself to a book from their bookshop page.
We've got some great recommendations on there.
Yeah, there's a lot of good ones. So yeah, hopefully this was informative and helpful for everybody. Parrish, thank you so much for coming on and talking.
Thank you so much for having me and for everyone's support. And I think these conversations are so important. And I'm glad the strike is helping people talk more openly about some of these things, because I think a lot of people who aren't in the industry aren't aware of all the nuances.
Yeah, I feel like it's been a while coming. You know, the last couple of years, there's been publishing paid me, and all of that.
Yeah, and I think this is all like an ongoing evolution of things that I think the trend is going to continue, because also union support is on the rise across the country, and I think that's so important.
Yes,
and so support all your unions.
Absolutely. Yes. Okay. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining. Go check out all of those links, and thank you, Parrish. I will be back with another video in probably a couple days. So thanks, everybody. We'll see you later.
Take care and have a happy holiday.